Okay, so in terms of the critical theory, that's our perspective which we had here. So therefore there's a certain class, and this certain class has a philosophy, and according to this philosophy it does its politics, economics, and so on. And liberalism is the philosophy of the bourgeoisie. But now, the bourgeoisie talked about freedom and so on only for the bourgeoisie, so they left out the non-bourgeoisie, and that is, of course, the workers, the fourth estate. So the bourgeoisie was the third estate. Third estate, right? And then the nobility was the second estate. The clergy was the first estate. They were guillotined by the bourgeoisie.
The
right?
third estate is what? The workers?
Fourth estate is the workers.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the third?
So the
Nobility
first
number
estate
one.
is the clergy.
And then the nobility second?
The second.
Was what?
Third estate is the bourgeoisie.
Okay.
So liberalism is the philosophy of the bourgeoisie, right? And of course, the fourth estate didn't have any. So therefore, you have to see that these ideas are not hanging in the air. They are in real heads, and these real heads belong to a certain class, like you do, like we all do, right? And we talk the interest of our class, except if you become a trader for your class. And that happened. That means there were people who developed liberalism who were clergy, bishops, for instance, and there were some were nobility. So, for instance, Voltaire, who is a bourgeois enlightener, went to Frederick the Great, in Berlin. They spoke French together, and Frederick, they belonged to the state, was very much fascinated by him, He lived with him in Berlin for quite some time. So that can happen, right? But it's important that the class limits are very clear. It's now with us. Now, Bernie is not a liberal. Clinton is a Roosevelt liberal. And then we have this other guy who runs against Trump. He is a neoliberal. And then we have a fascist, which is Trump. But it's important not to, if it's a man or a woman, black or white or whatever, important is what their philosophy is. Because from there you can see what makes them tick, what makes them run from one place to the other. They spend a lot of energy going from one town to the other and all this, It's not very easy. And that is, how they see the future. And that is what the limits are, what they will not do. You know that Clinton, even if she goes a little bit to the left now, when she's in office, she will move to the center, and like her husband will even move right to the center. So that also a liberal can do that, So then you will have people and say Clinton had betrayed her own Roosevelt liberalism, she would, or her husband does, and so on. So it's important that you see people how they move in their own fields, and not to mix up Bernie and call him a liberal as they do all the time. He's not a liberal. And he doesn't say he's a liberal. He says, I'm a democratic socialist, right? Mm-hmm. That's something else. So socialism is the philosophy of the fourth estate. Now, Marx was a bourgeois, so he belonged to the third estate. So did his father, so the director in his high school. They were Kantians.
But if we look to Bernie from his democratic side, we can say he's liberal from that side.
No, what he calls democracy is something else than what Clinton calls democracy. Clinton thinks she can be paid by the ruling class and can still be democratic. It's not possible. You cannot have demos, kratein, the people govern, and at the same time have an oligarchy and paid by her. That is the attack which Bernie makes against her all the time. Right? So she can only have a formal democracy. That means the transfer of power according to the rules which they make up, and they have this rule conflict at the moment. Okay, are we all here?
No, not yet.
Who is sitting over there? How did you get in here? That was somehow... Oh, there we... Almost we are here. Okay, welcome. All what I want to know, everybody should say a few things about your own paper, right? What you did. Okay, very good. So, we are still here. Okay, because our friend here concentrated on liberalism, fascism, and so on. So he took the questions of the examen, not the essay, but the questions. Okay, one question we concentrate on. So therefore, they have a different class basis. That means these philosophers express the interests of a class. So if a worker votes for Clinton, he really votes against his own interests. And that is what millions of the workers do, and that is called false consciousness, right? So therefore, Bernie today went to a strike, workers' strike. That's where he belongs. These are his people. That's the fourth estate, workers. It's not the bourgeoisie. You belong to the Egyptian bourgeoisie, right? That's something else. Well, we have to know where we ourselves belong to as well. So Marx belonged to the bourgeoisie. He was fed by Kantianism. Kant is the great bourgeois philosopher, bourgeois, the greatest of them. So he was influenced and sucked that in his youth, but then he betrayed his class, right? So he studied Hegel, who was also a bourgeois philosopher, right? And he used that monopoly of education, and the great, as far as philosophy is concerned, the greatest ever accomplished, and turned that around and made it into a tool for the fourth estate. So he had a noble woman who came from the second estate.
Didn't he?
No, Marx, yeah. He married a woman from the nobility, and they both moved into the slums of London. That's where the fourth estate lives, right? So, and that is necessary that you have a trader, because the fourth estate has no education. They don't even know where they are. And therefore, somebody has to go over there and formulate for them and interpret for them where they are, who they are, and so on. So what Marx calls a proletarian is not simply a worker, but is a worker who is conscious of that he is a worker and what his interests are, and that he is exploited, and so on and so on. American workers don't know this. That is the whole problem, though, that Bernie is some kind of an educator who daily, you see the millions who follow him, get this education who they really are, and that they are not bourgeoisie, because most workers think they are third estate, and when they have a little house, a garage, and a car, then they think they are,
But I'm kind of confused now.
Why?
I thought that democratic philosophy, is a part of the liberalism.
Yeah.
And or at least is a big practice of
Okay, there is a democratic thing, which is a liberal democratic notion, or liberalism has a concept. Fascists have a concept of democracy. They were all Democrats, the fascists. And then the third estate, socialists, have a democracy.
Okay.
The socialists say the bourgeois democracy is not a bourgeois democracy. That's what Bernie says all the time. Because the ruling class, pays Clinton and so on, and she does what they want. So she is not really democratic, right? So, we have to...
Democratic can't belong to any of these three categories.
Yeah, okay. So when I came home, I had Weinstock, my professor, and he gave lectures at the University of Frankfurt, so I went there. And what he did was first time to explain what is a reactionary, what is a conservative, what is the difference between a reactionary and a conservative, what is the fascist, and so on. To clean that up is very, very important. If that is messed up, you prepare the territory for fascism already. So it's interesting, the people say that Trump is a fascist. It's newspapers. And the first thing, fascist, Mussolini, and so on. He does not defend himself. And the people don't know what that means. Because the liberal propaganda said a fascist is somebody with a swastika, somebody with a brown shirt, somebody with a little beard, and so on. They personalized it. So all these guys are dead. So therefore, they don't know what the hell it is now, and so on. So that is not to be educated, okay? So that means if we have this idea of thought, philosophy, ideas, and so on, that is rooted in the social reality, and that is where it comes from, where it is fed by, and so on. So, and we have that very clearly. I mean, it has seldom been so clear. So, for instance, Trump says, he has been cheated by the Republican leadership, because he has these popular votes in the millions and doesn't get any delegate or super delegate.
He still doesn't have enough.
Well, not enough, or in some states, not at all. But what I'm amazed is, that he, in his limited brain, does not know that this has been there from the beginning. That means from the beginning, the bourgeoisie, the third estate, has put in mechanisms by which they can rule out what does not belong to them. That means representation of the fourth estate, or a third party, or a Bernie. So So, of course, when I won with McGovern, so when I was his campaign manager in the 3rd District, they put in a new rule, the super delegates, in order to get McGovern out. Because McGovern was a liberal, but he was too much already in socialism. He wanted to have an income for all Americans, which, by the way, in Europe, they go with this. Yeah, they propose that, the Social Democrats. Okay, so it becomes very clear. There is no reason for confusion whatsoever. Why he does not know, everybody's astonished. He says, we have that all the time. Of course they have it. But nobody explains why they have that. They have that in order to exclude fascism on the right, that would be the Republicans, and to exclude socialism on the left. That's why this rule has been put in. So a fascist or a socialist may come in with a tremendous amount of people, they all shout and so. And then come the delegates. They're all employees of the state or the party and so. And they say no. Now there are limits to it. See, they expect in Cleveland that there will be rebellion. Because if somebody comes with overwhelming popular vote, which would be democratic, or Bernie, and they have to repress them and put in somebody who has much less but has these delegates, then you will have an explosion. And we had that in Chicago, in the 70s and so and so. And there were trials and everything. So it goes in rounds and it comes like a fever attack, in a dying society. Like fever attacks, it comes again and again back. So McGovern is forgotten, but then comes Bernie, and Carter in the middle of it, and so on. And then it is repressed again. It comes up again because of the Fourth Estate, Marx is dead, Hitler is dead, and so on. But the Fourth Estate is not dead, and they sit in the slums, and they're unemployed, and so on. So
what makes fascist guys come always from the Republican Party and the social comes from the...
Well, because the Republican Party is in itself already right all the time. So the Roosevelt liberals are on the left and the neoliberals or liberals are on the right. But that right and left is still inside of liberalism. So what you cannot do is to get outside of liberalism. And the fascist goes outside of liberalism, the socialist goes outside of liberalism.
And why they always go from that side? I mean, why always fascist?
Because under liberalism, which has the constitution, everything is only for the bourgeoisie. So those who are left out, which is not the clergy and the nobility, because they have been guillotined or pushed in the corner, but the Fourth Estate is there still. So, and the Fourth Estate rebels because of income inequality and so on and so on. Then, when the socialists come up, you have on the other side the power elite. They are talking about the corporations have gone into the discussion now. We are employing people and so on and so on. So Bernie attacked them, but and so they support Trump. They don't like Trump, but when the unrest becomes too much, then they get the Trumps in, then they get the fascists in, and the fascists have to neutralize the socialists because the liberals are not able to do it anymore.
So another way.
You have to see it dynamically, right? Yeah. Not timeless in a timeless way, but in the time structure, so as it follows each other.
No, why socialist tends to be Democrat, while fascist tends to be Republican? Why we didn't have why Bernie wasn't Republican and Trump wasn't?
Well, because there are two types of liberalism. Liberalism as such is bourgeois, but in the bourgeoisie itself, you have a low bourgeoisie. So in the National Assembly in Paris, you have the low bourgeoisie, which then guillotined the clergy and so on and so on. The high bourgeoisie, the bankers and the industrialists, wanted to have a constitutional monarch and so on. So you have not only the Fourth Estate, you have the low middle class. What they call now the middle class is gone. The middle class was a product of the Flint sit-in strike. So that's recreated, the labor union saying, we created these people, highly paid workers, and but that is disappearing, because those jobs are going to China or whatever. So that's what the whole discussion is about. But shortly, you were about these three philosophies, or four, three, and these three philosophies are not hanging in the air, the people's head or so. People are grounded in their class, and they share usually the interests and the perceptions and so on of their class. And so each class has its own philosophy, And so the low bourgeoisie is usually the carrier of the fascist thing. The workers are the carriers of socialism, except they have to learn it from somebody, and therefore you need traitors of the bourgeoisie. Like you had traitors from the clergy and the nobility, which wrote the constitutions for the bourgeoisie, because the bourgeoisie was not educated well enough, and so on. And now the workers are not educated well enough. Okay? That's enough? Okay, now we come to you. What did you do? So you can put this later on there, right, so that I have it, your paper. You print it out. Okay, very good. Yeah. Okay, now we come.
So I took the first part of Habermas's theory of communicative.
Oh, good. Okay, we have a Habermas scholar. That's
Yes.
good.
So basically, looking at his construction of rationality.
Okay.
And he does to rationality how the sort of Adorno and Horkheimer are done with the Enlightenment. He goes, the rationality is based on this presupposed premise of ourselves within the community. Therefore, we have to go about removing ourselves. We have to recognize that, and we have to move away from what's the institutional? Is that the right word? The instrumental rationality.
Yeah.
So we move away from instrumental rationality, which presupposes a natural order, to a communicative rationality, which takes into effect this, and he uses a sort of trinitarian.
Did you take a special book for it? Or?
The theory of communicative action.
Okay. Oh, volume. Okay.
Yeah,
very
I
good.
took the
Very
first
good.
section of the first
That's great.
chapter.
Could you give me some water over there? Did somebody give me some water? Okay, wonderful. Thank you. That will help me. Okay, very good. Anything else? So that's what you concentrated on.
Yes.
Habermas, right? That's good. Second generation, and then particularly this difference between, and that leads, of course, deep into our discussion here, right? Anything else?
No, I mean, many of the same things we've talked about throughout the class.
Right. Okay, so that was
Thank you. I have him back.
Okay, you have them back here. We can put them over there. So we have another one tonight, the Nuremberg trial, right? We have it in there already. We're prepared already. Okay, now let's say something about this, that we integrate it into our overall discourse. So Hegel is the great man for them, and Marx, of course, comes from him. But Hegel is the follower of Kant and Fichte and Schelling. So these are all bourgeois enlighteners, right? That's all the fourth estate. So that's the connection between those two, right? So these two, and Hegel, for instance, was frightened of 1831. That was the year of his death, when the first commune in Paris came up. So commune are the representatives, the workers who were left out. So by 1831, that means 20 years after, 30 years after the revolution, they discovered already that it was freedom, equality, and so on, only for the bourgeoisie. And so it is still here now. It's not for the slum people on the other side of the railroad station. So, and therefore they rebelled. So we had 1831, the first socialist thing, so that was not bourgeoisie. Then 1870, in Paris. The Germans marched in and conquered Paris, Then the bourgeoisie, the French bourgeoisie, allied itself with the enemy, with the Prussians, in order to fight their own proletariat. That means so fierce is the struggle inside of a society between its classes that the bourgeoisie was rather willing to ally itself with the external enemy against their own proletariat. And then in 1848, we have that. Can we wait a little bit? Then everybody gets his turn, okay? All right, very good. So then in 1848, Marx went to Frankfurt, and there you had a similar problem now. Instead, the bourgeoisie allying itself with the proletariat, the bourgeoisie allied itself with the nobility, and therefore proletarian revolution took not place in Germany. So the same way, why do we not have a labor party? That has a reason, right? So the German proletariat could not make it if the bourgeoisie had allied itself with the proletariat against the nobility and the clergy. Germany would have not his Hitler. So the failure of that time, no revolution in Germany, 1848, in the Paul's Church, I would go there to It would be in a hotel right on the other side of the Paus church. So then Hitler could have been avoided. So, okay, so
Again,
then we have another proletarian upheaval in 1917, right, in Hamburg, in Munich, and then in Leningrad, and in Moscow, and in Peking, and so on. So you see, it's global, because the bourgeoisie is global, and as the bourgeoisie is global, the proletariat is global too. So the American proletariat, the Canadian proletariat, the German proletariat, and so on, they are not all on the same level. So the American proletariat is economically better off than the proletariat in India, for instance, or maybe in Saudi Arabia, or maybe in Egypt, and so on. So, but they are all the same class. And Marx, when you go to the cemetery in London, in the cemetery there, you see all workers of the universe, unite. What he wanted was that as the bourgeoisie is united everywhere, that also the workers would be united. And it hasn't happened yet, right?
But how is it that could you avoid it if the nobility would allies with the bourgeoisie?
Well, then they would have had, their revolution. See, the French had the revolution, the British had the revolution, and the Germans didn't, and the Russians didn't, and so on. So the nobility stayed in power, the clergy stayed in power, and so on. And so what you have in Hitler then is the low bourgeoisie, which was in the assembly there in France. The low bourgeoisie finally made its revolution, or thought it made its revolution. The workers thought that Hitler was also for the workers. That means he called himself a conservative revolutionary, and they thought he was a revolutionary and went from the SPD and from the communists over to him, not knowing that he was what Reagan was and what Trump would be. That means a conservative revolution, that means a counter-revolutionary.
In fact, he created
that was his
jobs.
script. Yes. Well, yes. He was a Keynesian and was able, like the fascist thing he had fought, and as a Keynesian he was able in 1934 to create 6 million jobs and so on. So, but that was not the work of the workers, but it was an alliance between him and Krupp and Thyssen and the bankers and so on. So, but that means he showed as if he was rebellious against all these people, but then he allied himself with all these people, as Clinton will go in, as a Roosevelt Democrat, and will then, when she is in, she will move to the center, or even like her husband, to the right of the center. That is the comeback of the boy there, or whatever, of Clinton, right? This comeback is the result of him moving from the left, then from the Roosevelt liberalism over to the right, to neoliberalism. Neoliberalism. Okay, so now let's go through this thing there about the two types of instrumental rationality and communicative rationality. So Marxism was, like the whole Western civilization, emphasizing the instrumental rationality. So instrumental rationality is necessary for survival. So self-preservation has to be done by instrumental rationality. That's technology, that's machinery, that is the metabolism between society and nature outside. So that's necessary, one has to have it, was always there. But in the West, in the modern West, that was tremendously emphasized. So, and Marx is not different there from all the other Westerners. So these are the people who developed the airplanes, the cars, Ford Motor Company, and so on. So the electricity, the steel buildings, the skyscrapers, and so on. That's all bourgeois. And that's all instrumental rationality. But as they put all their energy into it, they had also other plans, namely communicative rationality. That means also to improve, make constitutions, new bourgeois constitutions, and so on. So they did something on the communicative side too, but their main emphasis was on this side. So the socialists still hope, the social democrats still do, that the improvement of the machinery and the improvement of the metabolism between society and the state would also improve the fate of the workers. So one would not have to make a revolution. One could lift the whole system up technologically, and this technological thing would also then solve almost automatically. Everybody would have to eat, and so on and so on. But then comes this whole thing with communicative rationality. So that means Kant and Hegel had set up these 5 human potentials, and you have them on your roadmap there, right? So 5 human potentials. And so Marx was, like the whole civilization, on productive or instrumental or functional rationality, and that's Western University, that's all of us still. It's right. But what they did now was, and where they became critical of Marxism, they said Marxism is too much like the whole civilization. It suffers from the same problems like the whole civilization. So he shifted then to language. That's the first human potential, language and memory. And then he moved to the struggle for recognition, and these Hannes, that's the next one. We had books here too. Hannes moved to the totally to the struggle for recognition. So all his books are about struggle for recognition. Habermas had that to some extent already, but he made the turn. It's called the linguistic turn. Wittgenstein, right? This turn took place in all sciences, and so Habermas did only in the critical theory what all the other sciences did. Since Wittgenstein, he was an engineer and a mechanistic later on, but he introduced this idea that we have to emphasize communicative rationality. That's where it comes from. And they're emphasizing those two, they de-emphasize somehow the class, because class has something to do with the division of labor, with the value of labor, with the appropriation of surplus value, and so on. All these things are still there. Habermas wrote a thing on historical materialism, so it's still there, but it moved into the background. And what moved into the foreground then was a discourse theory and a discourse ethics or communicative ethics together with Appel, who was not part of the critical theory, but Habermas worked with him, and that goes to Peirce here in the States, who was a Kantian, and Mead and so on, Peirce and Mead and so on. So there are Americans involved, and all these Americans who were involved were all Kantians. So it is a vacillation between Kant and Hegel, but a strong emphasis on Kant, including the newest thing of Habermas, about the World Republic and international law. We will see that today in the movie. They have Nuremberg and so on. And people, students very often find that boring now, because there seem to be other problems, like the refugees and all that, and he talks about a world republic according to the model of the United States, or model of the European Union, so that is a little bit away from what people are immediately worried about in Frankfurt and so on, these Syrians moving in and nationalism coming up and closing the borders again, and the euro falling. The dollar is very strong. I'm very happy about it, because when I come to Frankfurt, I'm not losing so much. So, but the euro dropped and the American dollar went up for years and years. It was different. It was the other way around. Okay, and then Greece and all these problems. So the European Union, is in a very, very bad shape at this moment. And the question is how they can model themselves out of this whole thing. I'm very much for it, and I hope that they will make it. But it fits in our overall thing, that the European and the Slavic world have overtaken Europe. But that doesn't mean that Europe has to go under. It can reconstitute itself. They couldn't make a constitution 2 years ago. They wanted to imitate us, an atheistic constitution without God in it, but a lot of people rebelled against it, so they wanted to have the name of God in it, and so it just fell apart. And so Habermas is suffering from all of this, right? So, but the problem still remains, no matter if you have capitalists or socialists or whatever, this overemphasis on instrumental rationality. That means we are sitting in beautiful airplanes and have, tanks and Stukas and bombs and so on. And not only we, the Russians too, they flew around American ships there with their airplanes and so on, beautiful airplanes, as beautiful as ours and so on. So they're all competing with that, but at the same time our marriages fall apart, our families fall apart, our old people are not taken care of, and so on. So all the things of communicative rationality don't work. And including the Constitution, the disobedience to the Constitution, not to declare war since 1945, but just make wars without declaring them, or now not to listen to that judge there, and the president obeys the Constitution, the Congress doesn't, and so on. So this whole hellishness has all to do with rationality. And the strategy was that the Frankfurt School is not systematic, right? So that means they did not repeat the Kantian system, they didn't repeat the Hegelian system, the greatest of all of them, but they went behind it to these 5 human potentials and tried to reconstruct them, but not systematically, but rather concentrating completely on language and memory, or on the struggle for recognition, without building a system. And because they thought that the system as such is already justifying the reality, so that the system kills the dialectics, and then things don't move anymore. That happened in the Soviet Union, that happened in the Catholic Church, and so on and so on. So that is why they are unsystematic, anti-systematic. Good, very good. So do you have it, or?
Yes.
Okay, then you can put it over there. You put it over there later on. Who is next? Who would say something? Okay, you can tell us something about what you did.
I wrote about the future.
Okay, very good.
This article began by shedding some light on the life of thoughtful and very planet Stiglitz. His name even spoke, who I think even spoke, I don't know, who refers to build an atomic bomb for the Thai II government. The fact that he was planning began consent by whole government. Also, the article shed light in the feeling of responsibility on the part of the students having a Christian background that teach the value like love. Also, the professor changed the portion of the story to demonstrate the law of gravity and dialectic terms. Also, the professor is said to have had the chance to build the atomic bomb for Hitler, but he refused for his own moral reasons. On page 13 of the article, it speaks about the way that the new courses by both the professors even spoke and broke both in their lecture by speaking about the future of religion.
Mm-hmm.
Also, on page 21 of this article, it speaks about the things that happen and take place in the religion space, and the way that people try to relate between education and faith, and many things of what they believe. Also, I agree with this article in all history, and in the way that it's a bitly present its case.
Okay. Now, you wrote about the book, right?
Yeah.
Did you write something about another article too, or not?
Huh?
Did you write about an article?
No.
Just about the book.
Book, yeah.
Just about the book. Okay.
I mean the
Very good.
chapter.
Yeah, very good. So particularly the first chapter, right, and then chapter 32.
Yeah.
And chapter 32. Very good. Beautiful. Okay. So let me just say something about this book. Sums up what we have done in 40 years in Dubrovnik. Right? So
Yeah.
this year, next week, I go to Dubrovnik, and for 40 years, sometimes twice, we went there. There was a civil war going on from 91 to 95. There were 200,000 people died at this time. Many Muslims died in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And so it was a counter-revolutionary war. It was instigated by the Vatican, by the United States, and by Germany. Germany did not want, they had 1 million Yugoslavs, and they wanted to do what the Americans do. The Americans take their tools and their machines out to China or whatever, and let the people over there, the cheap labor over there, because then they save the social costs, education, health, and so on and so on. So the Germans always took the people in from outside, let them work there, already the Nazi time, already before. And then that was okay, but they had to pay for them social security, health insurance, and so on. So the Germans decided they wanted to take them over to, they wanted to send the Yugoslav back, like we do, and with machines they would work in Yugoslavia. The Yugoslavs would pay for the education, and they would make their profit. The socialists in Tito and later on in Belgrade did not agree to that. So then they decided to make a regime change. So we have innumerable regime changes where the CIA goes in and then the military goes in and so on. They did the same in Kiev and more recently, so they did that in Belgrade too. And so the whole republic fell apart. They stimulated nationalism, Croat nationalism, Slovenian nationalism, and so on. And those these nations crushed against each other. Milosevic was in charge. They changed every year. They changed their government. Milosevic, by the constitution, had to defend the country against dissolution. So he tried to keep Croatia in the Union, in the Republic, and then he tried in Slovenia and so on. And nowhere did he come through because of the weapons which were shipped in everywhere, and so they dismantled the country. So that was part of this story there. And when the war went on, I went there and I brought money for the wounded of all these ethnicities. I simply refused now just to love the Croats and hate the Serbs and so on. I brought medicine here from Abidjan to them again and again, huge suitcases full, year after year, sometimes twice a year. And so on. So when we celebrate, the city will come, the mayor will come, we will celebrate, and the whole city will celebrate with us. So that was, and it's important now that it was a counter-revolutionary disaster. That means when you say counter-revolution, you have to have a revolution before. So the revolution was the Tito revolution. Tito was a blacksmith, and he organized the partisans, and he threw the fascists out, and he liberated Yugoslavia from the fascist regime, from the Germans, from the capitalists, and so on, and established a self-management socialism system. So the hotels to which I went for decades was all owned by the workers, no capitalists anymore, nobody exploiting them, taking the surplus value and so on. They produced their own surplus value and then determined what they want to do with it. They owned yachts, the airlines, they owned all the hotels, they owned all the banks and so on. They did very well without a bourgeoisie.
He was a dictator, Tito.
Well, that's what the bourgeoisie says. So,
they persecute Muslims there in Yugoslavia, in fact.
Well, I mean, what he was a revolutionary who, you have to, if you want to throw out somebody, you have to get people together. So, and I saw year after year on May, how the people, I visited him once in Split, and people, the street were jubilating when he was coming, and there was no party who would force them or whatever. He was the people's tribune about, the people about that. So he not only freed them from fascism, he also freed them from Stalinism as well. So he was the leader of the non-aligned, people. So therefore he was able to balance that. The Russians always tried to integrate him. His wife even was on the Russian side. So his wife was, when I visited him, she was in home internment. She was closed up in her own house. And there were some of his generals who had cooperated with the Russians. They were in prison. It was funny, he came in one car with a little dog, and there was no wife. The little dog was in the second limousine, came after him. He was in his 80s, and he had red hair, and so he was loved by the people, a little bit peculiar, but he couldn't breathe well anymore, so he went split to the coast where the air was better than in Zagreb, and so in Belgrade. So we talked with him about certain measures. He had professors in Zagreb, they could not teach because they had a plan to do the self-management system all the way up to the highest government, full democratization, and Tito thought it was too early, so he paid their salaries, but they couldn't teach. So when the students were with me, the professors were missing. When the professors were there, the students were missing. I had to have his permission to come every year because of religion. They were atheistic still, and so, but I got the permission every year. I said I will not come anymore if those professors and those students cannot come together, but they still didn't come. The next time, the professors were there, but the students were missing, and so on. So I met some of them only in Budapest and in other places, but not in my course. So that's what I describe in this first introduction there. It's the whole history of the whole thing. So in Korčula, which is a beautiful island near Dubrovnik, there for 10 years the critical theorists, the Frankfurt School people met there. Marcuse, Fromm, Habermas there, they were all there. They met with the Praxis group in Zagreb. There was a Praxis group also in Budapest, and they came together. So the Frankfurt School was much broader than this, but that was a summer school, the summer school of Korčula. And then the Tito government, at a certain point, my friends there always told me that the people were not friendly in Korčula, that's why it stopped. It stopped after 10 years, but I think I found out that the Tito government did not really want to continue, because they went to the young Marx, particularly humanistic Marx, and were critical of Tito's type of Marxism and wanted to have more self-management than Tito allowed, because all the hotels were all in the hands of the workers, but there was still a group of politicians sitting on top which would connect the airlines to the hotels and the banks and so on, and therefore had a tremendous power. So they wanted to get rid of that political group there, and there was one of those politicians sitting in every hotel and every bank. So in order to make it much more democratic and socialistic and so on. And so I think that is why this group finally had to discontinue. The printers in Korčula didn't want to print the journal anymore, and their speeches which they gave, and but what happened then, and that is the decisive thing. So the last meeting which they had in Korčula, they wanted to talk about Marxism and religion, and that was a thing taboo really to talk about this there, and it never came about. It never happened. But in the following year, I was in Zagreb, in Dubrovnik, and they asked me, the professors of the University of Zagreb asked me to have a course on religion, and I had just given 2 speeches, Marxism and Phenomenology, I gave a speech, and then also Marxism, the other one was Philosophy of Science. So, and in both cases I had ended with the future of religion. And so I said, why don't we take that title, Future of Religion? And everybody was very happy. And then, so after Korčula ended, we continued that.
I read that. You wrote that somewhere. I read that for you. You wrote about that. I read it.
Yeah, there. That's what it is. That's what this work is about, right?
Yeah.
That is, yeah, okay. So, and then we started, and now we have done it 40 years. The others lasted only 10 years. That's 40 years. Here, my predecessor, a Jesuit, was fired after 3 years. I'm here already 50 years. I'm very happy. I'm celebrating all these things tremendously. My predecessor even will become a saint. He will be canonized in the Diocese of St. Louis. And the university asked me a year ago if they should say something about it. I said, be quiet about it, because you are the first university which fired a saint. And that will be horrible in world history, and the Western will not stand well there. You cannot fight against the saints.
To make it good, they should announce you as saint.
No, I wrote to the church here. I said, you have to get fired in order to be a saint. And I said, I have no chance to become a saint because I cannot be fired anymore. That's the end of it. End of the story. Okay, so that is the rest of this first chapter then. So through the years, all the difficulties which we had, and how you feel when a counter-revolution comes, you feel when a revolution is coming. So you can predict it very often in the stages. And there were symptoms, and I described them. There was one professor of atheism for all of Yugoslavia in Zagreb. And so I went to him and visited him, and he had just visited Heidegger. Heidegger died as a fascist, and he described to me how he embraced him and so on. So with Americans again, you have to see where you are in God's name. This is wilderness. So they always want to get together, Adorno and Heidegger, and mix it up and cook a soup or whatever. So, but Heidegger was a fascist, and then they say, well, that was his philosophy, and that was his political practice. So politically, he was a fascist. But, still his philosophy is not fascist. It's most idiotic type of thing. And that's all. I mean, even in the Ivy League colleges. But now, a few months ago, they found out, the black books, or what by Heidegger. And it's volumes and volumes on fascism, and his fascism, and the fascism of his philosophy, and so on and so on. The same thing happened with Eliade, I come here, I'm here for a year or two, and I said, don't take Eliade, he was a fascist. He belongs to the party there in Romania, and they have killed thousands of Jews and so on, and he wrote 50 articles for Mussolini and Hitler and Salazar and so on. So don't, no, that's not true, that is his critical, whatever it was his religiology or his, phenomenology of religion. Has nothing to do with it, and so on. So Eliade came, we invited him. So he was there. He was a very noble, very fine person. So he was a bourgeois, really, not working class bourgeoisie. As a matter of fact, he looked a little bit like the Romanian aristocracy or so, aristocrat. And so I asked him, and I had said to the department before, and they had studied under him. They had studied under Eliade the fascist and Tillich the socialist. And the socialists and the fascists had a seminar. Tom Lawson, and all these people, they were there. So they had a choice, and they all chose fascism. So I said, no, it's not a fascist. So I said, Professor Eliade, how is it now? Where do you stand? And he gave you left, right, and so on and so on. He said, of course on the right. I was always on the right. So he didn't hide it at all, So they could have known. Well, but at that time, the 50 articles he had written, for Mussolini, for Hitler, and so on, had not come out yet. So they always have to wait until they get black books or whatever. They cannot, with their brains, think ahead of something, and so on. Or see in the park the whole thing, or in the tree, the forest, and so on. So and the guy had to come. They had to see him, and then he had to say it. But even then, they didn't change. Tom Lawson said, we forgave him. I said, you don't have to forgive him. The Jews have to forgive him whom he murdered. What do you have to do with him? You come from South Africa, and you're a Boer. You're a Dutchman, What the hell do you have to do with if you forgive them? I mean, this disaster, the intellectual disaster of this country has no limits whatsoever. And it has something to do with this, what we discussed with you before, the ideology and the class and how that all belongs together, and they don't know which class they are from, and they don't know which class is going to the university, where the students are coming from. We have only 2 or 3 bourgeois guys on campus in the last 50 years. The others were all working class guys, the professors. They come from the same class from which most of the students come. But it is not thought through, it is not recognized, it is not lifted up into consciousness. It's all repressed into the unconsciousness. Okay, so
can we not find value within philosophies that have these roots? Because Bertrand Russell says Kant is at the root of fascism, and this is so.
Well, we have to see, what they mean. In Hegel is the roots of fascism. Right. So. Yeah, but we have to explore that then, So what is it really in Kant? So, the fascists, for instance, took Hegel's theory of war, So you could take that and can say, they took Hegel's philosophy of war, so, and therefore, he must be a fascist. But Kant, did the exact opposite. So Hegel did the opposite of Kant, because Kant wrote that book about eternal peace, which, by the way, we read in Argentina, the hotel where I'm going now, why the Serbs were bombing us. And I went to the airlines, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I looked in that book there, which the airlines have, with all the pictures, and there's suddenly an article, American professor in Dubrovnik. And I look at it, it must be me or whatever. And then she says, and he taught Immanuel Kant eternal peace while the Serbs were bombing the hotel. That is, so it is Kant, who is the peace guy. And it is Hegel so you cannot say that both of them are fascist. So if one is fascist, and the other one is said the opposite, could not be fascist. And so, but maybe the fascists took more from Hegel. I mean, Hitler thought that Kant and Hegel, and Schopenhauer, that they were all great German guys, and so on. So you have to study it, and what is true, to what extent Hitler is rooted in Luther, in Luther. Luther was a great anti-Semite, and so on. So one can do that, yeah.
But we take Marx, and if we go that route, then Marxians and Stalin, if that's a terrible thing, then we should say we shouldn't read Marx, but doesn't that...
Right, so, but there's the same thing, to what extent was Stalin still a Marxist, and to what extent have they changed, and what have they changed, and Trotsky, what did Trotsky do, and why did they kill him, and so on and so on. So it's a very complicated thing, but one has to be open for it, right? So, and they will now edit, Hitler's books too, and scientific edition, and that means that they will go, where did he get that from? Definitely Schopenhauer, massively Schopenhauer. Can we make Schopenhauer responsible for Hitler? Can we make Nietzsche responsible for Hitler, and so on, Many people say that too, that there was, his sister and connection with Hitler, and so on. And so, but we have to be very careful, Maybe there is different Nietzsches, there are a French one, a German one, a Nazi one, and so...
Stalin, Marx can't be blamed for what Stalin did?
No, because, the way how they interpret, how Lenin interpreted, for instance, and Lenin was a real intellectual. He had a diary about the whole logic of Hegel. He went through the whole logic and transformed the logic, which was the theology, really into the alphabet of revolution. So so Lenin is something, but Stalin and Lenin are very different people, Stalin was not a theoretician, really. He was a practitioner more, and he was also under pressure to do what the Russian bourgeoisie had not done, namely to industrialize. So therefore, now as a socialist, he had to do what the bourgeoisie did not do, and that is where all these projects come in. He built hundreds of cities in Siberia, all with atomic energy projects, and they had not even names, When Gorbachev came in, they had only numbers. City number 100, city number 200 or whatever. And so that distorted and took off the rails, the whole project, So therefore the Frankfurt School then called them red fascists, so that they were red. That means they still had the name of Lenin and Marx, but then they became fascist in terms of their gulago and their repression of religious groups and other things, the authoritarianism and so on and so on. So, well, these questions are genuine. They should be asked, But Jesus, to what extent is this what you see around here? My God, that's the exact opposite of what the rabbi stood for. There's absolutely nothing to do with it, Trump builds a wall. Christianity means in-group, out-group breakthrough, Like the Good Samaritan was a foreigner and helps the Jew, It goes through the walls. And there comes this idiot there, Trump, makes a wall in the name of Christianity. Like the Berlin Wall, like the Jewish wall, between the Palestinians and the Jews. And so they're all wall builders, and that has absolutely nothing to do with what the moral revolution which Jesus brought into the world. So, and one has to be very careful, because our brain is caught, in our class and the class perspective and so on. So one has to be very self-critical all the time, and so if one is not self-critical, then one cannot criticize the perspective of other people. So that's including ISIS, that's including the Islamic brotherhood, and so on and so on. So
It's very difficult to criticize
yeah,
oneself.
it's very right. It's very difficult. Yeah, but one simply does not have a right, to criticize the other if you are not willing to do that yourself. You cannot say they cut the head off over there, and you forget, all those Christian crusaders, and they forget the cutting the heads off when they killed Christians, for a 30-year war. They annihilated every village in Europe, for 30 years. So before they criticize those people, what they're doing, they have to criticize themselves, and not saying, Bernard of Clairvaux, the great saint, he agitated for the Crusades, was a saint, and so on and so on. So, yes, so it's a very hard life to be an intellectual person. I think it's the hardest type of work, much harder than working in a mine or whatever. Okay, so that was your thing. That was about the book there, right? Very good. So just put it over there. Who is the next one? Yeah, okay. You are the next. Don't forget the cookies. This is the cookie day. Okay, can you tell us a little bit of what you did?
I wrote about the chapter, the European, American, and Celtic Wars, and the global ethics, and the Cold War. First, I wrote about the decline of the old Europe that was marked by the rise of Russia and the emergence of America. In America, one of the new superpowers, diversity, would be...
So did you take the questions then, or did you...
No, just summary and review about the chapter.
Okay, you took one of the books, or...
Yeah, the chapter's title is European, American, and Celtic Wars and the Global Ethics. In the
Okay.
book, the name of the book, Future of Religion.
Did you take that too? Oh, chapter out of it.
Yeah, the chapter. The
Oh,
last chapter.
chapter 32, or
I don't know.
which one is it? Or 33?
The last chapter.
The last chapter, yeah,
Yeah.
33. Okay, very good, wonderful, great.
Yes, and in America, one of the new superpowers, diversity, would be appreciated by all. Also, I talked about despite the great achievement by cooperation between America and Russia, it still doesn't prevent the Cold War between the two nations.
Okay.
This war was also ideological, where the differences between the two countries were magnified, such as political system, economic system, religion, use of weapons, among many others. Also, and after the fighting the Cold War between the two countries, the U.S. and Russia know that it's now time to move forward, and Europe's hope of integrating Russia into European Union has been proved wrong, since Russia is developing its independent system.
Right.
And that's the...
Very good, wonderful. So that's what the last chapter is about, right? So that means the fundamental thesis is, which goes far back, it goes to the critical theory, and it goes to Hegel and Goethe and Schiller and the idealists and the enlighteners and so on, who all had a certain sympathy for America, but they also had to admit that Russia and the Slavic world were also the land of the future. So they looked forward. They felt, that Europe was declining. So Hegel already by 1830 or so would tell the Europeans not to make any wars anymore. It was too late, but the Europeans didn't listen. I was once teaching in Greece, in Ioannina, and the professors asked me if the Germans had really known the great philosophers well, Kant and Hegel and so on, would they have made all these things which they did under Hitler there, penetrating Russia, killing 27 million people and so on, and the Jews and so on. And so I said clearly, no, they would not have, because they would have known that all what Hitler and Mussolini and Franco did is too late. You see this with Trump now, to make America great again. It is the romantic part, when were we great, where we want to go back to, and so on. If he would have left the great out and would say, make America great, as I did with my remarks there when I had my 50th anniversary, then it would be better. That means he would leave it open where we are going to. So when did they appear there, the Slavic world and so on? Quite some time already. So when you see the great literature of the Russians, Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and so on, so before the revolution already. So the First World War, when they were catapulted into we suddenly appeared in the Normandy and so on. Second World War, then the Russians appeared in Thuringia even, and we appeared in the Normandy and also in Thuringia. The Slavic armies and the American armies were meeting and so on. And today nothing happens around the globe, not in Egypt, not in Saudi Arabia or whatever, which would not be influenced either by the Slavs, by the Slavic world. What do they call it now? The Euro-Asian community or whatever. They have a name for this in Moscow now. So for 50 years we traveled back and forth between the Slavic world and the European world and the American world. So, and we, in order to see who would be faster in its development and so on, definitely the Slavic world is somewhat back technologically and so on, and one doesn't understand it. You know, wonderful soil, everything is there, the potential is there, but what it is in the people, why they cannot move faster, while even when the Lufthansa builds an airport in Kiev or whatever, they don't know really what to do with the damn airport and to develop it themselves. One night I was in Kiev, I think 2 years ago, they put me into the wrong plane. I was suddenly going heaven knows where, to Siberia or whatever, and I just wanted to go to Crimea down there, and they had to pull me out of the plane again in the middle of the night, put me in another one and so on. So that means they didn't develop all that, and it is all strange to them, and they have to learn it, and they don't learn it very well, and so on. So I stood once in Kiev. I waited for the Lufthansa to get a ticket. There were 4 Russians in front of me. It took them hours in order to find out where the hell they wanted to go. And then finally they had the ticket. And I said, now it's my time has come. And then suddenly they all come back. And they said, well, that's not where we want to go. We have changed our mind and so on. So it is just, that's when the fascist comes up in everybody. Because if you have this empty territory with which nobody does anything, that practically invites everybody, you know, to march into it and take it all. So nevertheless, that is how it still is today. I mean, it's not that the Europeans don't do anything. They helped, you know, they built even little airports in Kiev and in Moscow and so on and so on. So they did invest. So, but it does not change. I went to Frankfurt, you know, and I said, I want to go to Kiev. And they said, that's all you can go to. I said, what's behind Kiev? Nothing. And there must be something behind Kiev. I want to go to Yalta. That's not too far away. A few hundred miles. There is no Yalta. There's just nothing there. And so what I found out was, in Kiev, there was a Lufthansa airport, and I go there in the morning and say, I want to fly to Simferopol. And then they said, well, it's not from here. I said, where is it from? Well, there is another airport. So I went to this other airport, which is the old Stalinistic airport. And I go there, nobody's there. I knock at the door, and the workers sleep in the office. So old grandmother came out, and I said, I'm supposed to fly to Simferopol. Said, well, it doesn't fly. I said, why not? It has been cancelled. I said, how long? A week. A week. So I said, I should wait here in the airport for a week. No, you can wait. She said, but you can also go to another one. So I went over the Neber River, which during the German campaign was full of blood and dead bodies and so on. So I went to the other airport. And then I said, is something fly? Yes, if it doesn't rain. But it rains. So I said, you cannot fly when it rains? No, you cannot fly when it rains. So I said, well, when will you fly? Well, the sun may shine by 12. I said, so I waited. No toilets. They have no toilets. I mean, they have the toilets of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel and so on. So why they cannot build some toilets is not clear to me. So I waited till 12 o'clock. It was still raining. They were still not flying, and I simply gave up. I had phoned to Kiev, and I went home again. I said, "This is disastrous. I cannot do this," and so on. I never wanted to go back to Kiev again. I came at night to Kiev, and there was a civil war atmosphere. They're always struggling with the Russians for centuries already. So I go to the hotel, and I have a letter from my student, Tatiana, and I said, "I would like to stay here tonight. Can I stay here?" That's why I have the letter. A Russian wrote that letter. It doesn't count here. Russian doesn't count here. That's all what I have. Well, I had to pay double for the night. And said, who is Tatiana? Must be your girlfriend. I said, no, it's not my girlfriend, it's my student. The same thing. So I had to pay double for the night. And then I had to go already at 6 o'clock in the morning. During the night, the whole Ukrainian army marched into the hotel. They slept in the hallways with the machine guns and so on. So I had to climb over these machine guns in order to go to the toilet, which they had toilets there for once a foreign hotel. So in the morning, I go to the airport, 5 o'clock. Suddenly a tank comes out of the forest and stops me and wants to have my passport. Then we drive another mile to the airport, and then suddenly police comes out of the forest. Another group of people. And they want to see the passport. So finally I am there at the airport, and there is nothing flying. So it is just...
Is it the same in Russia like in Ukraine? This technology backstage?
Well, no, it must have something else. So the hotels in Simferopol, for instance, Stalinistic hotels, they have no beauty, no decorations, no real architecture. It's more than that, and it's hard to exploit. It's not race. As many Germans went there to the Ukraine as they came over here. So they were just swallowed up over there, and they didn't do anything, didn't accomplish anything neither. So you see a lot of German guys, they speak all Russian, but you see their ethnic, see their face and their bodies and so on. It's all German, all Germanic. So, but it doesn't help. They become like all the others. So, but nevertheless, that is the theme of this thing there. And that's very important now for the future, right? What we do. So the day, again, when you turn that on, you always have some, there's American propaganda. So there was some kind of an airplane, a Russian airplane, was flying close to an American battleship, and there's a back excitement about it. And so, but let me sum it up, the whole thing. We can make a little break there if you want to. So let me just sum the whole thing up. So they are the frontrunners. That presupposes a certain view of the historical process. That means the Greeks were in the foreground, the Egyptians were in the foreground. They all have their empires. The Jews were in the foreground. After people have their empires, then they fall back and they retire, like people. They go into the niche. Some disappear completely, others hang around for centuries, and so on. So like the Greeks, like the Romans, and so on. So we go to Rome, we gave a speech, there you see the whole city. There is the Etruscans, there are some ruins, and then there are the Roman times, some ruins in the Middle Ages, and so on. It's all there, but it's all finished. So it's just something where you go for vacations, but it has no world historical relevance whatsoever anymore. You can live a good life, you can play golf, and so on. So, but then history moves on and leaves things behind. And what was wrong with fascism was that they wanted to do in the 20th century what the Germans had done in the 13th century, or what the British had done in the 18th century. They had conquered India, they had conquered Saudi Arabia, and so on. So that is what could be done at that time. Hitler wanted to do the same thing. He wanted to march to Iran, but he was stopped in Alexandria and stopped in Stalingrad, and the heartland theory, which Obama wants to restore, was missed, was failed, and so on. We talked about this. So now, what is the task, in terms of this philosophy of history? And Adorno and Horkheimer, they are still philosophers of history. Habermas gave it up, so he has an evolutionary theory like Parsons or whatever. So that means a task has to be fulfilled. The task is, in the Slavic world, you find solidarity. people, wherever they are, they stick together. They help each other and so on. But what is missing is autonomy. Whatever I described now, what makes it so sad, the view when you go there, is that there is not enough autonomy. So there is a certain authoritarianism, which was from the Tsar and from the patriarchs and so on and so on. So people somehow have not learned to think themselves and to initiate and so on things. Now, when I had Katja here, who was my assistant for many years, she would deny all that, and she would say that there was also autonomy, but she couldn't prove it. Whatever I saw in St. Petersburg, it was not autonomy, and so on. And it hasn't changed with Stalin, and it was there before Stalin, and it was there before the recent Tsars, and so on. So
autonomy, independence, what you mean with
yeah, autonomy comes from Kant, right? So that means that you make use of your own understanding. You don't follow any more divine or religious or secular kind of authorities. You think for yourself. Initiative. That's in liberalism. In liberalism, you have a tremendous emphasis on do-it-yourself and so on. And that was so powerful. But when the Depression came, the Great Depression, 29, then they had to take the other side, solidarity from the Catholics. That is the Roosevelt New Deal. That means, yes, autonomy, but then there comes a limit where you cannot do it yourself. Then you need the help of others, the nation, the society, and the state, and so on. So the whole struggle to keep the state small and so on, the neoliberals and so on, that has something to do with that. To keep the state small means individuals should do everything else. It should be deregulated, and it should be privatized, and so on. That's all autonomy, basically. So we here have autonomy, but without solidarity. They have solidarity without autonomy. And the societies look like that. So they have a lot of collective arrangements with each other, and so on. But the autonomy is missing. And here we do have this autonomy, but the solidarity is missing. That's not entirely true, because sometimes there may be some autonomy over there too. Sometimes there may be solidarity here too. I was in Washington once, and the airplane crashed in the Potomac River in December, and I saw people jumping over the railing to the bridge in order to rescue those down there. So we do have that. When the system breaks down, then this solidarity breaks through, but it disappears again as soon as everything comes into place and the system functions
You
again.
mean the autonomy on the individual level? Or
On the individual level, yeah. Mainly it's for individualism, right? We said liberalism is atomism, so that is a negative description of it. But these atoms, like Heisenberg, Heisenberg thought that the atom already is free, and in the first chapter of that book there, I described that also Ivan Supek, my friend, he thought that the atom was already free and could move on its own, that God was gambling, and Einstein said God does not gamble. So that is liberalism. Liberalism emphasized autonomy, possibly already the autonomy of the atom, which can already move a little bit on its own and has its freedom already. So therefore everybody should be free. Okay, so therefore, now the task would be in the Slavic and the American world, that's the thing of this article there, is that somebody has to get it together. It was never together. Most society, traditional society, were solidary, but autonomy is something which came up only in Wadi, and Kant formulated it, but it is there already in Luther, in his rebellion against the Catholic Church. The individual emancipates himself from the church, from the state, from the family, and so on. So you could say it's me, but it's not that. So because this autonomy does not work if it is not mediated through solidarity. And this solidarity does not really fully work neither if it is not mediated by autonomy. So the question is, for those two front runners, is to bring something together which has never been together as such. And you can see that here, for instance, when you have minimum wage, $8, $9, $15, or whatever, there you see how much solidarity there is. Or what they want to do about the slums, or what they want to do about health insurance, and so on. Everywhere you see how the solidarity is missing, except Bernie. But with all the others, it's missing. So The question is, how we lift that up and become more solidary. If we become more solidary, we will also become more genuinely autonomous. For them over there, the question is that Putin, every step where he lets a billionaire come in, there's a Russian billionaire visiting here, so he lets some of them vegetate around and so on. That may be the beginning of more autonomy, but he restrains it right away and has to. If it is not mediated by solidarity, when these bastards become selfish and rob everything and so on, then he puts them into prison or sends them home again to the West and so on. So that is what the struggle is all about, right? And you see it in every little detail, divorce issues, abortion issues, and so on and so on. It's everywhere where you have autonomy but without solidarity. Solidarity with the past, solidarity with the present, solidarity with the future, with the children, and so on. So that's what's missing. Now, that's an exaggeration, as I have to emphasize that, because there are elements where you have a family where a mother stays and the father stay with their children, and so on. It's not a complete devastation, and so on. But it is an emphasis on autonomy, a de-emphasis on solidarity. If you are autonomous, you're breaking through, your selfishness, and so on. Ryan, the Speaker of the House, and Ayn Rand, he follows her teachings, and so on. Selfishness is good, greed is good. That is a perverse type of an autonomy. That means an autonomy which is not mediated by solidarity. And Stalin, you could say, is an extreme form of solidarity, not mediated by autonomy. And particularly the most, progressive people, like you can start with, with members in his own party, had to die for this. So the task would be for both worlds to bring that together. And therefore, the articles there emphasize a cooperation between the two in order to help each other. They could help us to find more solidarity. We could help them to find more for autonomy. And we could very well compete that way. So if that would happen, it would be good for the whole species. If that does not happen, they both together have 77,000 atomic and hydrogen weapons. It means the end of the species, or so far back into the Stone Age that we cannot even imagine how far back it is. When they start, they take Baltimore out, we take Kiev out, or take Moscow out, or whatever, then that's the end of the story.
Okay, on the lower level, could we say that successful education, family where father or whoever could make the family members, the kids understand, be autonomous and solidarist at the same time, learn about the
Yeah, but the traditional family was, of course, authoritarian, right? So the father was determining everything and produced authoritarian personalities on his way, that led to many things. You have it in Catholicism, it's an authoritarian religion.
But these traditional families usually had autonomy and solidarity, both together. Nowadays, most of families just have autonomy.
Right, yeah, that's right. So therefore, when we become modern, right, before modern, you had the family, the authority of the family was all arranged marriages, for instance. You still have it in Saudi Arabia sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So that would be one pole, right? And modernity means to go to the other side. I mean, the individual and the chemistry of the individual. I'm in love. That is the other side, So, and there is something in between. For instance, my assistant here, she thought her boyfriend, with whom she lives for 5 years already, went home to her father to ask for his hand. This is just often peculiar. I mean, this is a nightmare, And but the poor girl has in herself still traditional things, where you had traditional marriage. You went and asked the father for the hand of the girl, and then you got engaged, and so on. But she lives with him already since 5 years. He asked for a hand which he already has for 5 years.
Not only the hand, but everything else.
Yes, and then she also waits all the time that he will propose to her, and that he will bring a ring. Why the hell should he do all that? It's all done already. They are married already. So what you have there is on one side is extreme arranged marriages, On the other side, you have where the individual decides, the atom decides, and one atom gets together with another atom, and so on. So, but these are extreme positions. So you have something in between where you still take your boyfriend and take him to the parents and say, "This is my boyfriend." That's a beautiful thing. But you may also leave it, so you may be more modern, then you don't go home anymore. If you're less modern, you still go home. But even if they would say no, you would then do it anyway. So these are, if you think in terms of polarity, these are the extreme poles, and then something in the middle. Okay, but that takes us somewhere else. Good, very good paper. Can you put it there? Yeah, you had a question? Okay, did you put the paper there? Okay, very good. Wonderful paper. Thank you.
I talked about chapter 23, the European and American and Slavic Wars and Global Ethics, 2013.
Okay.
The chapter is summary of the efforts made by famous scholars trying to fight for just and fair society. It can first be noticed that the European Union had updated some practices that were displayed in other states and parts of the world. Two major groups consisting of Slavic and American people decided to take another movement. The study examines some of the events and how unity was attained in society with the furthermore the future of religion. We see that the European was not supposed to engage in any wars with their neighbors or countries, relating of them as that was point history. The period comes before the collapse of the Berlin Wall during the first period of the 21st century. The old geographical politics seems that to return as the element could be noticed in the few places. During the chapter, we see that the scholars continue with their interested by keening to know a lot of things about the Slavic world. One of the major challenges for this group noted by scholars was that there were no peace owning religion. Far away, we see that the two parties of Slavic and American never agreed fully and continued with their Cold War. In conclusion, it has been seen that the scholars have over the years worked hard to ensure that the society is safe by promoting peace. Early European Union had that brief with where tried to be noticed by the American and people from the Slavic world. Scholars tried to establish some peace into the place, but some Cold Wars still examine and control how people related with one another. Some groups came up to fight for the peace in the society, such as Mahatma Gandhi, who said that people should treat others as they wish to be treated. He said, as the chapter, so I will do to and treat other people as you wish them to treat you always. Was the great general summary. That was the general summary of what was expected of the people.
Very good. So that's a golden rule, right?
Yeah.
Treat others as you would like to be treated. The Enlighteners criticize that a little bit because bad people can use the golden rule too, and then it looks a little bit different. So, nevertheless, so Cold War was one of the catchwords, right, which you had, and the great danger is now that the Cold War starts again. So because of propaganda, American propaganda, Russian propaganda, Trump, broke through that political correctness when he said, well, they Putin, he kills the journalist, and Trump said, I don't know of any Putin killing any journalists, and then he ruined the whole American propaganda machine. So therefore, sometimes, a fascist is more honest than other people, and he just doesn't believe what the propaganda thing there says, the other people's propaganda. Okay, but the real situation on the ground is that NATO has moved too far to the east. You have to think when you exchange, what we do in discourse is to exchange perspectives, right? For a moment, you take the perspectives of the others. So take the perspective of Moscow. They remember Napoleon, right? Napoleon marched with 800,000 men from France and everywhere else to Moscow. They ruined everything on the way there, and the Tsar was not even there. The Tsar was in St. Petersburg and so on. So then afterwards comes Hitler, and he has not only 800,000, he has 4 million people with whom he marches in there, devastates the whole country up to Moscow and Kiev and Stalingrad and so on. So now after this comes suddenly this NATO thing. Now the NATO are in the Baltic, or close to the Baltic states. They are in Romania, they are in Hungary. So they have moved into the Slavic interest sphere. The Americans and the Europeans invite them, so just join us. So they want to integrate them into the European-American community. They did that already before. They offered the Russians the Marshall Plan. They offered East Germany the Marshall Plan and so on. But there was a price to be paid for it, namely to give up socialism and so on. And they didn't want to do that. So therefore they said no to it. And they say it now. That means the Slavic world is a world in itself with its own center. It cannot be integrated into Berlin or Paris or something like that. The Europeans have to get used to this. Now there are some in between. There are Slavic states like Croatia, where I'm going now. They do not want to belong to the Slavic world. They say, well, there was some pan-Slavism, but that's all over. We want to belong to the European Union. And Montenegro has already the euro and so on. So I think that those Slavic areas which belong to Central Europe, that they should be free to decide where they want to go. Now, the Russians have put their foot down in Kiev now, in the Ukraine. It is not clear if the Ukraine will survive at all. So the Crimea has already split off. There are 3 other republics which have cut off themselves in the east and so on. So Kiev itself goes from one crisis to the other. The present president was in my course in Yalta there in the last 12 years. In the beginning he came, so I know him quite well. And there were always some nationalists, and he was one of them. But it's not clear if the Ukraine will survive the whole thing. So beyond the Crimea, so when we tried to make a regime change there, as we do everywhere else, they blocked it in Kiev. So it was not possible. They made the regime change, but it was not followed up. So there were neoliberals and fascists. The fascists burned down the synagogue in Kiev. When I came down to Kiev the first time, they remembered that when the SS marched into Kiev, on the first day they killed about 130 Jews right away by just coming in. Later on I found out that about 30 miles away from Kiev there's a quarry in which they shot 30,000 Jews and killed them there. And they just recently had built a new synagogue, and there the fascists burned it down again, just now, 1 year ago. So that is the limit. Further, the NATO cannot go. As a matter of fact, they have to pull back. So that is
Where was that synagogue that was burned 1 year ago?
It was a new synagogue they had built in remembrance of what had happened in 1941 when the Germans came in. They killed the 180 or 120 in Kiev, and then 30,000. Recently, it was half a year ago, there was a woman in Germany who discovered the album pictures of her father. The father was a flyer for the German army, and he flew over Kiev and he took pictures when the 30,000 were killed, but he didn't take the pictures of the dead people who were killed, but the clothing. Before they were shot, they had to take their clothes off, and the cloth was put along those graves. And so when he flew over it, he took the pictures of all the clothes they had been taken off. So you have to, when you take their perspective, that's something which we should have learned here, right? Critical theory means to exchange Habermas, means to exchange perspective. We have a perspective, the American perspective, that's fine. We should have a perspective. But other people have a different perspective. I struggle with my children. They drive me nuts inside. They come with this American shit all the time. I said, this is fine. We are Americans. I brought you over here. That's good. But other people have other perspectives. And you have to learn to look through their eyes. Just for a moment, look through the Russian eyes, what that looks like, what Europe looks like, what America looks like, and so on. So it's very important that only when we do that, exchange those perspectives, can we avoid a Cold War. If the Cold War, I will go in November, I will go to Russia, I will go to Moscow, and also then to Yalta, and so on. I hope that it's possible. It's very difficult. I have to pay $250 right away for a visa, and then the hotels are different. They don't take MasterCards. The banks are not connected. I don't even know how I'm supposed to pay, and so on. So, but we have to do whatever we can personally in order to prevent that Cold War, because everybody will be pulled into it. At the moment, we can be happy with Obama and so on, and with Putin, that they can balance the whole thing. But if you get a Trump in or whatever, then hell can break loose. So, yes.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I want to know the reason why many Russians developed the feeling that where the top place was one of the greatest of all the time.
Say that again. That what did the Russians say?
Why many Russians
Yeah.
developed the feeling that the where was top place was one of the greatest of all the time.
The war was the greatest?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So they call it the Great National War, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. The reason for that is when Lenin made a revolution in Leningrad, then what was in Petersburg before, then the West tried to kill the revolution. That means to make a counter-revolution. So in the 20s, 12 Western states, including the United States, marched into Russia. According to Trans-Siberian Airline, they marched deeper and deeper, railroad, and they marched deeper and deeper into it and killed a lot of Russians on the way. But they were not able to stop Lenin. So Lenin won, and they had to withdraw. There are still 8,000 Americans buried in Murmansk who participated in this first counter-revolution attempt. The second counter-revolution attempt was Hitler. That was the most powerful, and they almost made it. Then they were stopped in the Volga. That was the end. And then came the third counter-revolution, and that was 1989, the neoliberal one. And that was done, that's with military things. Gorbachev, yeah, that's the Gorbachev thing, right? So the perestroika, right? The whole movement of thinking differently and so on. So where Gorbachev always remained a Leninist, but today he expresses his terrible disappointment, and I don't know why he couldn't see who Reagan was, this blindness that he believed the character, the actor, and so on. It's just a great riddle to me, and so on. So, but that was not what was really planned, what happened. Neither the United States nor Gorbachev or the Secret Service in Russia and so on could foresee what power nationalism would have. That suddenly all these nationalities would break loose, which Lenin and so on, and even Stalin, they had tried to overcome that nationalism by thinking of Russia in its totality and so on. But underneath, they obviously did not convince those people. And so when this counter-revolutionary came, something happened which neither the CIA nor the Russians had foreseen, that suddenly the Ukrainian and all the other nationalities would suddenly break loose like they did in Croatia and so on. So it is nationalism, and today Putin has on one side, he has several fascist parties on one side, and he has several communist parties on the other side, and he is moving between those two sides, and since he does it quite well, he's very popular in his whole country. But sometimes he will behave like a communist, sometimes he will behave like a nationalist, so that is the present Russian situation. And while this war against fascism, that was a tremendous effort. I mean, the airport where I will land in November, Hitler came into that airport. He was in Moscow already. Stalin was on his way out to the Ural and so on. So, and they were able to turn it around. It was an unbelievable, heroic national event in Russia. So, but then all what they won there, they lost in 1989, and the main reasons were economic, and because of the following thing, in the Ukraine and in Croatia and so on. After they had won the revolution, after they had conquered fascism and capitalism and so on, they had to ask their people for another generation to create what is called primitive capital accumulation. It happened here along the East Coast, where millions of people were pushed into tenement houses and treated like slaves, where they lived together like pigs, or worse than that, and had to work 18 hours without Social Security, health insurance, whatever. So you need a beginning push, primitive capital accumulation, and so on. And so that they would have to, after the war and the devastation, they would have to do that. The alternative was to go to the World Bank, our bank in Paris, and take up money, and then with that money rebuild, but to pay the interest back. And so what they all did was, they did not want to impose another generation of sacrifice after all the sacrifices people made already, and they want to give them a better life. So that is how they started. And then in Yugoslavia, I studied it in detail. They went to the bank, and then they built these beautiful hotels, and people came from Europe and everywhere. And so they had income and so on. But the income was not big enough to pay even the interest, the high interest they had to pay to the World Bank. So they had to take money up again in order to pay for the interest. And so they spiraled and spiraled deeper and deeper into an economic disaster. And so without any shot fired and so on, all these were undermined. There was only one country which resisted, and that was Romania. Romania did not take up money, and the leadership there imposed these sacrifices on people, and you know what they did? They killed him in the end, and his wife.
Who killed whom?
In Romania.
Who killed whom?
The people. The people, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, because of that. So that is what the bind in which they were. And Tito particularly did not want to, and so did all the others. They did not impose that, and they thought, well, we take up the money and we pay it back, and we work hard, but no matter how hard they worked, they could not pay the stuff back, and so all their economies were ruined. So that is not the only factor, but that's a big factor. Why? The third counter-revolution, after the first and the second, the neoliberal one. So there was a liberal one, a fascist, and a neoliberal one. And the third one was finally effective. Up to Kiev, because Kiev means now that's the end of the neoliberal counter-revolution. It's finished. George Soros is an important man because he wrote a book, Why That Failed. And it failed because American corporations moved in, they were unrestrained, the national governments were not prepared to restrain them, they robbed the whole country and left again, and the disappointment was enormous, and so they didn't get the people on their side. And that is then the present situation. Okay, very good. Good paper. Can you put it over there then? I have it there. Okay, who is next? Do you want to make a break? What time is it now? Do you want to say your prayers?
Yeah.
Yes, you would want to do. Okay, 5 minutes. Yeah, 5 minutes. You can pray, you can eat, you can drink, you can be happy.
Can she present first?
Do you want present first? Are you the last one? Okay. You are the last one? Is somebody else there? You. One more.
Yeah.
One more, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, you first and then you second, okay?
Okay.
Very good.
For me, I chose the first chapter, the future of
First chapter, okay.
religion.
Very good.
First of all, I begin my day
paper by Small Story. This story explains why the author decides to name the new course the future of religion.
Right.
First of all, I will for this section explain the origin of the course, future of religion. The author explained that once visited Ivan at IUC and read one paper in Ivan's new course, Philosophy of the Science. He additionally read another by Professor
Franco, yeah.
Phenomenology and Marxism. The author noted that both texts end with a paragraph on the future of religion. The author was later invited to introduce a religion course in the new IUC. He decided this effort and decided to name the new course the future of religion. This is story.
Right.
I taught another of the summer school of
Cortula, yeah.
Cortula.
Mm-hmm.
Cortula. The section discussed the post-World War II switch from capitalism to socialism. And I talk about the Frankfurt School and the theoretical theory of religion. In this section, the author emphasizes for explain the origin of the religion and how people become oriented toward a particular religion. The author here further explains that heretical perspective of the religion determines the present choice on the religion. Yes, I focus for my paper of this section.
Okay, very good, wonderful. So that is, part of what we did then, and there were several religions involved every year for 40 years. We never missed one year. During the war, we were supposed to go to Amsterdam, and I refused, and I went back and said we stay there. We were with these people for 20 years, and it was wonderful and peaceful. We cannot leave them alone now when the war has started and all the killing has started and so on. So that's why we stayed there. In the Hotel Argentina, that's where I go, there again now next week. And this hotel was the only one which was not occupied by refugees. So the Serbs came in, they went into the villages, they took the refrigerators out, they stole the tower from the airport and took it all on wagons back to Serbia and sold it there, and then they shut the villages to pieces. They just put the tanks up and shut everything, and so 50 villages, and all the people came to Dubrovnik, into the hotels. So there was only one hotel in which I, with my group, and there was the UN there too, and the NATO, in order to observe the fighting and stop irregularities and so on. So, yeah, that was, and then we had different religions, we had different disciplines, sociology, psychology, philosophy, theology, and so on. And we had wonderful discourse, and some of them, a Dutchman there who cannot come anymore because he's too ill, he wanted to invite the Serbs who were sitting on the mountain, where the picture which you have there is on the mountain which was occupied by the Serbs, and they shut down on the hotel. He wanted to go up there and invite them for discourse, and said, discourse means that we include everybody. We cannot leave the Serbs out, in spite of the fact that Holland, his country, had also argued against the Serbs, and the UN, and they all had somehow rejected Serbia and its actions and so on. So, and we had some trouble in the coup themselves, where right-wingers, poor Dutchmen had a hard time in the coup. So we had strange things in our coup.
This picture in Germany, right? This picture in Germany, right?
No, this is in Croatia there. That is above Dubrovnik. That's where I go again. That's my wife. It's 1 year before her death. She died 1 year later from cancer in Canada, where I taught. Yeah. No, that is on the mountain, and where we look down, that is Dubrovnik and the Mediterranean and Italy and Africa. And so behind us is Bosnia-Herzegovina. That territory is all settled by Muslims there, what you see behind. And the NATO put the Bosnia and Herzegovina together, Croats and the Muslim population together in one state, because the Europeans didn't want to have an Islamic state. When the Turks attacked Vienna and then withdrew, Bosnia-Herzegovina was the only Muslim country which they ever left behind. So when Islamic troops withdrew, they did not leave a state behind. But once they did, and that was in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And there also terrible things happened. So when you go to Mostar, is the city, Mostar is an Islamic city with mosques, and I always visit them, and cemeteries, with gravestones of Muslims, brothers and sisters there. And so there was a bridge, it was 500 years old, between the Croat part and the Islamic part on the other side. And the Croats blew the bridge up. My wife and I, we still walked over the old bridge, and she fell on it. She was ill already. And so after we left, then the war came, and then they blew it all up. It has been rebuilt in the meantime.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
Your wife is from Germany? Or,
No, she was from here.
Okay.
Yeah, she was in Washington. We studied together in the Catholic University of America. She was a social worker, and I came from Germany for leadership training and so on. So that's where we met in 1953, and then 1956 we got married, and that is about 10 years, 11, 12 years later. Yeah, and then so, we were married altogether 22 years or so. And so this picture is very historical because the cancer had already started, but we didn't know what it was. But then in fall of the same year, then she was diagnosed with...
Okay, how long the cancer?
1 year. It lasted 1 year, yeah. So from the diagnosis. So the diagnosis, at that time it wasn't diagnosed, but she felt already that something was wrong. And then in fall it was diagnosed, and 1 year later then she died. So.
Because in the past not easy to discover cancer like now. This is why just 1 year. Now.
You mean cancer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it started as colon cancer, and then it went into the liver, and then it went into the lungs and so on. But it's still, today my father died from cancer, and so something has been changed. There's chemotherapy now, but we did that all. We did chemotherapy, but it was, from the beginning, it was clear that it could not really be stopped. So we kept the hope up all the time, and but the doctors here in Kalamazoo knew that it was terminal and could not be stopped.
She lived with you here in Kalamazoo?
Yeah. Yeah, in the same house here. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
My father died with the same type of cancer as her.
Yeah. So and people do right now. So the cancer epidemic has not been stopped really, but some progress has been made, and some people live a little bit longer because of it. Yeah, it's still a horrible.
And then my family, a lot of my family has had cancer.
Yeah.
I don't know what's the problem with.
Well, the problem can either be genetic, that one can inherit some kind of a gene or whatever, but I think that it is mainly environmental, what we eat and what we drink, etc.
Yeah.
So, in Washington, for instance, my wife grew up in Washington. There's a high percentage of cancer there in the city. So each city you can see how many people die from cancer, and so it's 20%, 30% or whatever. It's high in Washington. So it's possible that she got something in Washington already, or that it's here in the water. The Kalamazoo River here is poisoned because of the paper mills. So the university got $1 million to find out who poisoned the river, and then they were supposed to have a trial, and the people would be punished by paying for cleaning it up. And so they discovered that the paper mills, there were 7 here, who poisoned it. So when you go to the river, you have frogs who have only 1 leg or 1 arm, and so on. And then when that became known and the university identified the culprits, they all left. They either closed up or they went to another state, and therefore they could not be punished, and therefore there was no money. The army was supposed to clean it up, but the army was supposed to be paid by the fees which were imposed on these capitalists, and they just left.
But
So,
I think the phenomena was global problem.
yeah, right, it's global, but so is the pollution, the pollution of water.
I think until now not discovered because the cancer attached many people.
Yeah, right. So, but the question is, the doctors sometimes push it on nature, and they say it's inherited and so on, in order to free the society from the responsibility. So it may be both of them, but one has to be careful. Doctors are natural scientists, so therefore they want to blame nature for everything. But we have to see to what extent society, the chemicals in the food, the preservatives, and all that. Hmm?
There is many products that may be caused by
Right, yeah. So, and but we have agencies, who look for that and want to diminish that. But it is possible, that after you catch it once, it spreads in the same family. But my children, all 7 of them, none had cancer so far. So, and we always, we cooked well. My wife cooked everything herself, and we always drank this water, not the water from the faucet and so on. But it may have been in her. Her mother died from this cancer. Her grandmother died from cancer in Washington. Her father died from cancer. So it may be that some cities, are more exposed to it than other places. You can get these statistics when you go in an area. You can know what percentages. If it's very high, there are some areas very low. Some areas very high.
You have daughters? You have daughters?
4 daughters and 3 sons, yeah.
Some research in Arabian Gulf area,
Yeah.
they found the number of women has cancer after war increased.
Yeah.
Maybe
After what?
after war. Gulf
Water.
Gulf War.
91.
Gulf
War.
Persian Gulf.
Persian Gulf water.
War.
Oh, war, the war, yeah, definitely. I mean, the weapons which are used, for instance, Hiroshima, yeah, right, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that of course cancer spread all over the place. So, but I think more traditional weapons can do the same thing. Yeah, I'm quite sure.
Because in Saudi Arabia, in the area in Saudi Arabia, the people or number of people there has cancer.
Yeah.
More than
the
Yeah.
because this is the same problem.
Yeah, same problem. Yeah. But see, there are about 99 different forms of cancer, and so if we would spend, a few $1 billion, I'm quite sure we could conquer it. So the efforts which are made are not sufficient. We spend more for the war than for these illnesses. So that is another problem. What society does, it's not only diagnosis, but to find also the chemicals and so on. But it is a very complicated process. Maybe a way how death usually operates, and one has to be very careful about this thing. But so there are over 99 or so forms of cancer, but some of them have been dealt with better than others.
I know some Dutch doctor researcher.
Yeah.
And she found some good successful treatment. It's not yet out.
Yeah.
She's my wife, so I know very well what
Right.
about
Yeah.
that. But it's not yet out in the market.
Right.
But they
Right.
want some.
Well, every little bit can help, As far as AIDS is concerned, they have found some cocktails, which keep you alive, and so I think more can be done. Okay, now we have one more paper, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I chose the 9 question from test.
Okay, you took the questions, right?
Yeah. Now I will talk about the question 7. When did the priority start in the equation of math? In the system that was proposed
Read
allocate
that again. What was the question?
7. When did the private property start in the evolution of man? The 7.
Just let me show. Which one is it?
Number 7.
7.
6 or 7?
7.
When did private property? Okay,
Yeah.
very good. Yeah. Okay, private
Yeah.
property. That's a wonderful theme.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yes.
In a system that was robust to allocate some basic resource such as land or to some specific category of people. That group are expected to use the manage according to their will. Private property commenced after it was seen by man for the need of having ethical development for the person. Additionally, it served the need of creating an ecosystem that can help people. And the question 29. Describe the human potential of the struggle of recognition. When human being, recognition serves both psychological and normative demonstration. If another person is recognized, focus on some future, many will end up admitting and greeting, appreciating toward person display such equality. It is due to have available of such recognition that man is made a behavior in some way and obliged to treat such people in certain ways that compress of recognition their normative state. This is brief.
Okay, very good. Wonderful. So you can put this over there too.
Okay.
So private property, of course, we talked about it, right? It's 10,000 years old, and it is responsible for the class system. It's responsible for the so-called just wars, where people make wars against them, and they want to have the rubber, and they make war in El Salvador, and they want to have coffee, and they make war in Iraq, and they want to have oil, and so on. So most wars are wars of robbery, that one wants to get something from somebody else which doesn't belong to them. So therefore, we have these movements in religion. We have all the monastic orders in Buddhism and Christianity, and also the Sufis and so on, who are against private property, are socialistic. St. Francis, we mentioned, the present Pope, and so on. So the question is how far they go. We discussed St. Francis, who was most radical. So we have it in religion, and then we have it in secular socialism, where they also, in the extreme case, want to get rid of private property. Bernie does not want to. That is democratic socialism. He would tax the billionaires for having free schools and so on. So, but that is an important problem for the critical theory of religion. Okay.